inverse effects because they work kind of counterintuitive. But the point is, the harder you play, the more it's going to close the wet dry of the signal. So in that way, you don't overload the processing and create unwanted consequences. So here's the example. It's a keyboard, and I'm calling this main example distoverb because that's why I wanted to create this concept. Basically, the ability to have a texture on top of your sound without it creating harsh artifacts that are unwanted the harder you play. So all I did was I created a system where the MIDI controller velocity is going to send the wet signal down the harder I press. So here we go. If I press soft, now if I press hard, we hear the actual keyboard signal. So here's a chord. Again, the softer I play, the more I'm going to get that wet signal. And what it is there's also a reverb happening simultaneously. So that's where you're hearing this weird feedback. What a cool little effect that makes, where you have the reverb and the distortion kind of playing, feeding back off of each other. And anyway, so the point of this was, if you have something that's either super resonant, super transient, or just harsh in general, if you feed that through reverb, distortion, and other effects, it creates a really terrible effect. It doesn't do exactly what you wanted, unless there's some specific sort of horror effect or something that you're going after. But in general, you're losing your processing integrity because you're basically just distorting and distorting and distorting some more. So the whole point is, the more harsh you play, the lower it creates that wet signal. So I did the same thing with the reverb and the distortion. So I can go. Now, I would also want to finesse the velocity itself so that I don't have to quite play as delicately because I don't have a great velocity curve on my controller. It's kind of tricky to get to those low levels. But in general, this is a cool idea. And actually, the main point of it was because of drum loops. And hopefully I'll do another video on that, which I illustrate how the harder you play the drum, it's going to channel less reverb. And so what that's going to do is it creates like a muting effect to the effect so it doesn't overdrive the reverb. So you wouldn't have this horrible wobbly reverb happening. And I know you can EQ it and do stuff like that, but basically distortion and reverb, like the harder you play with a drum sound, the more it's going to mess up the integrity, the crunchiness of the signal and just turn it into pure distortion or pure resonance. So there we go. This is Inverse Effects with a starter of distoverb.